Hi, Mac Sheldon here, and welcome back to the shop. The PantoRouter is a highly accurate and repeatable woodworking jig made of top quality materials and carefully engineered to deliver excellent results. Assembly is fast and easy, following the step-by-step assembly guide, and once it's all put together, you'll want to make some final adjustments for high precision performance. Dialing in the PantoRouter takes just a few minutes, and once you have it set, it should hold its high tolerance for years. Be sure to do all of your adjustments with the router unplugged for safety. The first step is to align the pantograph carriage with the table. Start by sliding the carriage toward the table until it contacts the two glide shaft mounts. Check to see if there's a gap between the mount and the carriage on either side. If there's a gap, loosen all 8 screws holding both glide shaft mounts and move the whole assembly so the carriage touches the mounts on both sides uniformly, then retighten the screws. When you're finished with this step, confirm the setup by chucking the centering jig that's pointed on both ends. Then move the carriage towards the table until the jig barely touches the front of the table on the operator's side. Lock the depth stop, back the carriage up an inch or so, and move it as far as it will go to the side opposite the operator. Slide the carriage forward to the stop and check to see if the point of the jig touches the table equally on the other side as it did with the operator's side. If it's even, you're done. If the carriage is not perfectly aligned, you'll need to loosen all 16 screws holding the glide shaft bearings to the carriage and move the assembly so the centering jig makes uniform contact with both sides of the front of the table, then retighten the screws. The template holders usually need to be adjusted to align with the template holder frame. Start by slightly loosening all 4 screws holding the template holder to the side sliders. We sent this 8mm wrench to help. Align the operator's side slider to the top of the template holder support post. Don't worry about anything else at this point, just the slider and the post. Lock the slider when it's flush to the top of the post. Now do the same thing on the other side. Next, align the template holder to the sliders and posts, then snug the 4 screws. Double check using a square, and once everything is nicely lined up, tighten the screws using the wrench. Next, we're going to adjust the pantograph to move exactly parallel to the table and your workpiece. Start with a block of fine-grained hardwood, at least an inch thick and about 3 inches long and 2 or more inches wide. Position the template holder so the centering jig is roughly halfway up the block, then lock the side slider knobs. Locate the wood block so it spans the first slot in the table. Slide the carriage forward so the jig touches the wood. Lock the depth stop, then scribe a line toward the right-hand side of the wood block. Now move the guide bearing across the template holder to the far side and scribe a line just beside the first line. If there's a gap between the first and the second line, note which side is higher. Place the shim from kit's bag number K14 under the glide shaft mounts on the low side, then repeat the test to see if it needs further adjustment. If the two lines don't line up and more shims are needed, always add the same thickness shims to both mounts of only one glide shaft. The thickness gauge is very useful in centering the joinery on our workpiece, so adjusting it carefully is worth the few minutes it takes. We've used lots of different methods to get it dialed in. This is our favorite. Start with a piece of hardwood about 1 1/4 to 1.5 inches square and about 16 inches long. A little larger or smaller should be fine. Make sure the sides are parallel and mark one side as top. We like to rip the piece on the table saw to make sure that the sides are parallel the full length. If you use a planer to make the sides parallel, make sure there's no snipe on either end. Cut a 1-inch piece from the end of the test piece and mark the same side as top. Cut about a 4-inch long section from the test piece that we'll use for clamping during our setup. Find the center of the piece using a caliper or centering ruler and make a mark. Clamp the test piece to the front of the table with the clamp position so it's not directly above the first mortise cut that we'll make. Mount the template marked 1.5 inches in the center of the template holder. Chuck that double-ended centering jig in the router and insert the tail of any non-tapered guide bearing through the pantograph handle and into the center hole of the template and template holder. Loosen the lever clamps on both template holder sliders and allow the template holder to slide up and down. This also moves the pantograph with the router and the centering jig. Move the template holder up or down while pushing the carriage forward until the centering jig is on the center line on your test piece. Chuck the 1/2-inch bit securely in the router, then slide the pantograph carriage forward until the bit just touches the workpiece. Set the depth stop for 3/4 inch, then back the carriage away from the test piece. Insert the 10 mm guide bearing in the guide bearing holder and in the mortise slot of the template towards the bottom. I like to press it all the way in, then back it out a 1/64 or so, just so it's not rubbing the bottom of the mortise slot. See that there's free movement side to side, then install the dust collection brush and do a safety check. Bit chucked properly in the collet tight, guide bearing knob snug, router speed set to 16,000 RPM, template and depth stop set so that the bit cannot contact the table, bit away from the workpiece and not contacting anything. With your right hand on the pantograph lever handle and in control of the router, turn on the PantoRouter. Then slowly move the guide bearing back and forth, end to end in the mortise slot, while gently pressing the plunge lever forward to advance the bit into the test piece about a 1/16 of an inch per pass back and forth. A light hand is needed to let the router do the work. Once the carriage meets the depth stop, retract the carriage and turn off the router. Wait until the router spins down and stops, then remove the test piece from the table. Measure the top and bottom shoulders, and if there's any difference between the two, subtract the smaller from the larger and note which is larger, the top or the bottom shoulder. We like to use millimeters for this because it's much easier to use whole numbers than fractions, or you can use thousandths of an inch. The objective is to determine whether the thickness gauge needs to be moved up or down and by how much. For this example, our top shoulder was 12.09 millimeters and our bottom shoulder was 10.97 millimeters. The difference was 1.12 millimeters. Since the PantoRouter operates at a 2-to-1 ratio, we need to move the template holder up by the full amount of the difference, or 1.12 millimeters. We selected the combination of 2 feeler gauges closest to the desired thickness. Loosen and raise the reference gauge angle on the back of the template holder support post. Then insert the feeler gauges, lower the reference to the feeler gauges, then tighten the reference angle. Now remove the feeler gauges, loosen the thickness gauge angle, and move it up to the reference angle and lock it in place. Repeat your test cut and measure again. In our example, we got it closer, but not yet perfect on the second try. So we adjusted it one more time, and this time we nailed it.
What are our numbers?
11.51, 11.51 to 2. Seems pretty good. We're within a couple thousandths of a millimeter.
The last thing we need to do is to find the center of the table. Unplug the router, then chuck up the split shaft centering jig. Insert a guide bearing in the center hole of the template and template holder. Loosen the 2 template holder sliders and raise the template holder as you move the pantograph towards the table. Move the depth stop out of the way if needed, so the point of the split shaft centering jig rests on the table. The tip of the point is the exact center of the table. You might want to mark this in pencil for now until you're confident with your adjustments. Eventually, though, you'll want to scribe the center line and make it permanent. You're done with the adjustments now, and your PantoRouter should hold these settings indefinitely. It's best to use a light touch with the PantoRouter, and there's no need to use pressure or force. Instead, take light cuts and let the router bit do the work. We hope you thoroughly enjoy your PantoRouter, and we love to see pictures of your PantoRouter in action and the work you do with it. As long as you're using your PantoRouter safely, we'd love to see you use it in new and interesting ways. Please let us know if we can help in any way. We'd love to talk woodworking, so give us a call or email if we can be of assistance. Happy PantoRouting!